All right. Welcome, everybody. Welcome, welcome. My name is Dana Sparks, and I am the director of the Georgia Real Estate Academy, which is the school offering this course for CE credit. I am also the qualifying broker of Maximum One Greater Atlanta Realtors. The reason I tell you that is because this is a communications class for real estate. And this is I like to think it's a fun class. I hope at the end of the 3 hours, you will also think that it was fun and that you enjoyed your time. So we shall see at the end of class. But the reason I tell you that is because there are a lot of issues between agents and clients, between agents and co-op agents, a lot of issues that could be resolved or more readily handled, or some situations that could be deflated if some of the communication skills that we're about to go over had actually been utilized. So I see these issues as a broker. I often have to deal with lots of issues, well, as anybody does. And again, just good communication or effective communication, professional communication could solve some of these issues. So we are going to dive in. This class is, well, let me just dive in. Before I get started, I will ask you to go ahead and enter in, well, you know what, this is in the notice to students. So let's dive in, shall we? All right. I am going to share my screen. I'm going to put my glasses on so I'm not squinting the whole time. And I am going, oh, lots of familiar faces. Hello, everybody. All right, let me share my screen. And I am going to get started. All right. So here we go. This course is Say What? Mastering Communication in Real Estate. In real estate, it is 3 hours of CE through the Georgia Real Estate Academy. And again, I am the instructor, and there is my contact information. And here we go. So the notice to students, this is the Georgia Real Estate Academy, is GREC school number 6915. GREC is the Georgia Real Estate Commission. We have a lot of agents that hear about our Zoom classes all over the country, which is really quite interesting. So just so you know, this is CE credit for an agent, a real estate agent in the state of Georgia, as it is a class approved through the Georgia Real Estate Commission. It is, as I said, Say What? Mastering Communication in Real Estate, GREC course number 62861. It is a classroom virtual remote broadcast. Obviously, this is a virtual broadcast of an approved in-class course. It is 3 hours in duration for CE credit. Just note, this is true for any virtual class. A student may only take one virtual CE class at a time or with overlapping times, regardless of the school offering the course, in order to get CE credit for any course, for either of those courses. So just think about it. If you were attending the class actually in person, you can only attend one CE class at a time. So if it is discovered that you have two computers open and you are trying to virtually attend two CE classes, you will not get credit for either class. Again, I'm the instructor, no homework, no exam. So attendance policy, you must be on time and present for all remote virtual broadcast instruction hours in order to receive credit. So how do we do that through a virtual class? Well, basically, we do that a couple of ways. We do that through the chat function, as well as The Zoom program itself does log your computer or device, however you're attending this class, being on and off, when the computer's turned on and logged into this class or not, as well as through the chat function, because we need to make sure that you're actually in class and have not just turned on the computer and walked away for 3 hours and come back. So through our school, we ask you to do that by entering in your name, your real estate license number, your email address, and your phone number 3 times. If you've already done so, you don't need to do it again. But at the beginning of class, when you first come on, we will take a break. So when you come back from break, and then the other time is going to be right before you leave class. Additionally, I will ask some questions throughout class. Go ahead and type in your answer in the chat. There will be times we've got a lot of people attending. So in the interest of time, there will be times where I will go on and answer the question before you have had time to think about it and put in your answer. But go ahead and enter that in the chat. Anyway, again, it just demonstrates that you are actually in class and paying attention. Additionally, the reason a lot of agents are asked why we ask for your email address and your phone number. There have been issues when we try to record your CE credits into GREC. We found that a lot of agents transpose numbers in their license number. They don't remember it. They're missing a number. So we need to be able to contact you in order to make sure that you get the continuing education credit that you're here to get, as well as the information. You can only get CE credit for any one specific course number once every 12 months, and there is no recruiting. CE credits will be recorded within 3 to 5 business days. Heidi Kelly, who is the coordinator of the school, will record those credits, and that is her contact information at the bottom of this screen. All right, also for questions, I do have the chat up so I can see what you guys are typing in. So if you do have a question, feel free to type it in the chat, and I will repeat the question and then answer the question. Additionally, towards the end of this class, I do have some really fun videos that I am going to share with you. This topic of communication for real estate, for business, for sales is an enormous topic. And it has been covered by a number of people, a number of specific real estate coaches, a number of specific business coaches. There is a myriad of information out there that you can find above and beyond this class. The point of this class is twofold. One is to really bring some specific just tips and tricks and how-tos for your communication as a real estate agent. And you'll see what I mean when I start off with that. And these are things that I have seen in my I believe 27 years of real estate, where some issues, as I mentioned at the beginning, could have been avoided had some of these issues been addressed, as well as we'll get into some generic communication issues, and then some specific sales issues. And then, like I said, we've got a lot of videos at the end. I've got a lot of resources and references for you. I'm not going to show you every video, but I do want to show you a couple. All right, so this is an oldie but a goodie. What we say to dogs. Okay, Ginger, I've had it. You stay out of the garbage. Understand, Ginger? Stay out of the garbage. What they hear. Blah, 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 Ginger. Blah, 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 Ginger. I just love this cartoon because it is sort of representative of what we say and what others hear when we are talking to perhaps our clients, our co-op agents, our brokers, so forth and so on. Just wanted to start off with something that everybody can identify with. All right, communication in real estate. Your communication skills are what create your first impression to others. And that first impression is going to have a huge impact on your business. It is going to impact how people respond to you, the respect they have for you, their perception of your knowledge, their perception of how much you care. You've heard the proverbial, don't judge a book by its cover. However, the reality of interaction with a stranger is you do tend to judge a book by its cover. You have to look at the cover or read the title to see if you're even going to open up the book and see what it's all about. And your communication skills are what do create that first impression. And as I said, how others perceive you does greatly influence your business. We're going to talk about communication in general and communication in real estate. Also, further on in the class, we are going to talk about some techniques and the dreaded scripts. If you have been an agent in real estate for any number of years, you will have definitely heard of the concept of scripts and dialogues. And what I find is really interesting. I find that agents really just love scripts and attribute the majority of their success to scripts, or absolutely hate them, say they come across as canned, so forth and so on. So we're going to talk about that a little bit towards the end of class. We're also going to talk about, generally speaking, how to build rapport, conversational objection handling. I'm going to give you an objection handling formula. For those of you who don't want to memorize a script, I'm going to give you sort of a formula or a way, a framework within which to communicate when dealing with an objection. The power of questions, persuasion, conversation. I'm going to use NLP. NLP stands for Neuro Linguistic Programming. That is a whole field in and of itself on communication. And that has to do with everything from vocabulary to eye movement. So I'm just going to give you one, I believe I've got one or two techniques to show you a little bit about that. And then again, I'm going to present to you a few scripts and dialogues. And the reason I do that is because there really is no need to reinvent the wheel. For as long as real estate has been a profession, buyers and sellers have had basically the same objections. And so there are some great objection handlers that you can at least get the gist of, if not specifically memorize an entire script that will help you. So that's basically what we're going to cover throughout the class. Breakdown of communication. 7% is verbal. Only 7% are the words that we use. 38% is vocal. Volume, pitch, rhythm, tonality, accent, tone of voice, things like that. And 55% of your communication is nonverbal. That is facial expressions, gestures, posture, eye movement. These past couple of years have had a serious detriment or damage to interpersonal communication because there is a lot less face-to-face communication. And so we are cutting out 55% of communication and what you are trying to say and what someone hears or takes in or understands of what you are saying. Not only not being in person, but then also with your face covered, you can't necessarily get an entire portrayal of facial expressions when you're only seeing a third of someone's face rather than their entire face. And, you know, without vocals. So a lot of you agents, despite these past 3 years, and if anybody is watching this video in the future, this is October of 2022. A lot of agents, for whatever reason, I don't know if it's because they think it's easier, because they don't have the skills. I'm not sure why, but a lot of agents have resorted to more written communication, email, text, phone in-person communication, in-person interactions have definitely come way, way, way down. Phone communication is way, way, way down than it used to be. And I'm going to go a little bit further when we get to that section on text and email communication and the opportunity for misinterpretation of what someone is saying. But let me give you an example of why written communication is completely different from verbal communication. So that first one, I've got something for you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 words. Think of the number of ways that could be interpreted. If you got that as a text message, or if you got that as an email or a note, say someone passed you a note, think of the number of ways that could be interpreted. It could be interpreted as a threat. I've got something for you. Or it could be interpreted as something good. I've got something for you. Can't wait till you get home. I've got something for you, implying I've got a present for you. I've got something you're going to like. I've got a new listing for you to show that's going to meet all your needs. Or I've got something for you. I'm sending you a TNR. So that's one example where the written word and the intent of the communication and the receiving of the communication could be completely different. What about the next one? 4 words. What's wrong with you? Number of ways that could be interpreted. What's wrong with you? That's more of a negative slant, like you are lacking in some skill, you are lacking in some knowledge, you are lacking in some experience, you are lacking in some discernment. What's wrong with you? Like, what on earth are you thinking? Or what's wrong with you? Could convey concern. What's wrong with you? Are you okay? I've missed you. You haven't called me back. Buyer, where have you been? What's wrong with you? How about the next one? Is that what you're wearing? That could be, is that what you're wearing? Oh my gosh, it's gorgeous. I love it. You look stunning. Or is that what you're wearing? I wouldn't be caught dead in public wearing that. Or that's not appropriate for the situation. What about the next one? What took you so long? Again, the negative slant to that could be, what took you so long? In other words, I've been waiting for hours and hours and hours. I'm aggravated. I'm upset. I've been waiting. You've wasted my time. You've shown me little or no respect. What took you so long? Or it could also convey concern. What took you so long? Was there an accident? Are you okay? Were you sick? What's going on? I'm showing care and concern. So as you can see, just with those 4 examples, the volume, pitch, tonality, that completely changes the meaning of those written words. And then just consider communication with someone speaking a foreign language. There are times, if any of you have traveled, I'm sorry about the difference in time. We're just now getting started. If you have traveled to a foreign language, or if you have interacted with someone where English is not their first language and it is your first language, or your first language is someone other than English, but somebody that does not speak your language, you can still communicate, can you not? There are ways using, especially hand gestures, for example, where you can communicate. Let's say you're traveling in a foreign country and you're in a situation, an area where they do not speak English whatsoever. Now, I'm not talking about nowadays, there are all sorts of technological aids such as Google Translate and things like that. But regardless of that, let's say you're traveling in a foreign country, nobody around you speaks English, you only speak English, and you are looking for something to eat. Well, you know that the international gesture for something to eat is you sort of put one hand under your face, you put the other hand as if you're holding a utensil like a spoon or a fork, and you sort of up to your mouth. I don't know if you can see my video, my camera, but you sort of pretend like you're eating something. People will understand you are looking for food. Let's say you have to go to the restroom. You sort of hunch over, you push your legs together, and you crisscross your hands down around your waist. People will know you are looking for a restroom. So there are ways to communicate with gestures. And then there are ways to communicate where you don't actually use the same vocabulary or speak the words with tone. Any of you who have had dogs or have trained dogs or have had to raise a puppy, you know that you can communicate with that dog with your tone of voice. And that dog will completely understand when you are pleased with what that pup is doing or when you are aggravated and need to correct them. By the tone of your voice, the loudness of your voice, the volume of your voice, the pitch. So there is so much communication that happens non-verbally. So now let's talk a little bit about the hierarchy of effective communication. By far, based on those reasons we just went over, in-person communication is the most effective. What do I mean by effective? What I mean is what you intend to convey is what the receiver actually hears or understands. That's effective communication, is you are all on the quote unquote same page. There are times, as I mentioned before, where what the person speaking or the person communicating, their intent is completely different from how it is received. So the most effective communication is in person, because in person you have availability of all of those methods, of all of those items we just addressed. You have availability of the words, of the tonality, of the accent, of the volume, of the facial expressions, of the gestures, so forth and so on. Next would be via video. And this would be interactive video, Zoom or FaceTime, where it's live interactive video. The next would be video, but it is like watching a movie. Bomb emails, a YouTube video, Facebook videos, Reels, TikToks, things like that. That's still more effective than just written, because it's not interactive between the person doing the communicating and the person receiving the communicating, but the receiver can hear the tonality, see the facial expressions, the gestures, and get a sense of the person who is initiating the communication. Then the next effective is on phone, verbal on phone. Again, you can hear the tonality, volume, and pitch, but you do miss out on the gestures, the eye movements. There are a lot of times somebody on the phone can say something and roll their eyes or raise their eyebrows, and that has a lot to do with what is being communicated, but the receiver on the other end of the phone line does not necessarily see those nonverbal gestures, but they do hear the, again, intonation, things like that. And then written, and that's email, text, or letter. Text, I'm going to go into text in just a minute. There are too many abbreviations and too much misinterpretation of the actual emojis that you are using. You have got to be extremely careful. I'm going to go into that a little more detail, and specifically talking about texting for real estate. Email, you can be more thorough, you can be more explanatory and write out a little bit more about what you're thinking. But again, we're still only using words. And as we used before, what took you so long? I've got something for you. The words can be misinterpreted based on the receiver, what is going on in their mind and what they think you are trying to say. And then a letter, an actual good old-fashioned letter in the mail that actually is written, and there are still words that can be misinterpreted, but the difference is a letter actually does demonstrate that you took some time to think about the person and write out your thoughts and your feelings. It takes more effort to write a letter than to just rip off an email. Now, I need to talk about a lot of just general tips for professional communication. And this has to do with if you are communicating in person, on the phone, using interactive video like Zoom or Skype or FaceTime, or written communication. Make it easy for the public or your co-op agent or your broker or your closing attorney or your appraiser or your lender to contact you. Include your full name and your title, your email address and your phone number, and then any website or social media links. I cannot tell you, I'm sure you guys have all experienced this also. How many times have you gotten a text message or an email from someone asking you a question, and you have no idea either who that person is or how to get back in touch with them? Put in the chat, has this ever happened to you before? Yes or no? Somebody's reached out to you, and do you know, is it, let's say you got a text message from somebody. Well, is it a co-op agent? Is it a potential buyer or seller? Have you gotten an email from a public person asking about a listing that you have, but you have no way of contacting them back? Let's say, I know as a, regularly, all the time. I've gotten emails from agents asking for they're in the middle of something that's of a timely nature, and it's a contract issue, it's a question. What's the timing of a TNR? What's the timing of a contingency? What does the contract say about a certain situation? And it is going to impact their client, probably financially. And they'll send me an email with their name, and that's it. So yes, I have their email address, but it might be more appropriate for me to call that person. And in our brokerage, we've got over 1,000, well, with the whole corporation, we've got close to 2,000 agents. I don't necessarily know off the top of my head if this is an agent that's in my brokerage or if this is a co-op agent. Now, can I take the time and look it up? Of course I can, but that puts effort on me. In this respect, I'm a broker. I don't mind. That's part of my job, is to look up that person's email address or phone number if they are one of my agents. If it's not one of my agents, I don't have their phone number. But make it easy for the person to contact you. Give your contact information back, your phone number. Obviously, if it's an email, you'll have their email address. But if I get a text message, I'll have their phone number, but I won't have their email. And it may be too long or too much of an issue for me to text back. And I really want to send an email or send an attachment or something for them to look at. And then again, include your full name and title. By title, I mean your name, and obviously that's pretty self-explanatory. And then your title. Are you a real estate agent? Are you a lender? Are you an appraiser? Are you a broker? Just put real estate agent or realtor or real estate consultant or whatever, real estate professional, whatever it is that you use in association with your name. I have a lot of you guys that have been on my classes before and have taken a lot of classes. But anyway, just so you know, the term realtor is a copyrighted term, copyrighted by the National Association of Realtors. So if you were not aware of this, you may only use that name, that label, that title associated with your name professionally if you do belong to NAR, and the way you would belong to NAR is if you belong to a local board of realtors, then part of your membership is also in NAR. And then include your email and your phone. Again, for those of you texting, there is a way. I believe just about every cell provider now has a way in their texting software, or you can get third-party texting software where you can create a signature in not only your emails, but your text messages as well. And then website or social media link. You guys are in business to help people with their real estate needs. You want to, anytime you have the opportunity to interact with somebody, even a co-op agent, but especially the public, you want to give them a place to go to check you out. Check out what company you work for. Check out who other people that you have helped with their real estate needs, what part of town you work in, what you specialize in, so forth and so on. Now that might be more than you need on a text message, but especially on an email. And I'll give a little bit more into specifics with email. Can you use realtors in your domain name, Alpharetta Realtor? That depends. Number one, you need to be a realtor before you can use it. I believe the answer to that is yes. I know, for example, you cannot use it as an LLC name or even a trade name. So for example, our trade name is Maximum One Greater Atlanta Realtors. And per NAR, per the copyright guidelines for using the term realtors, so Bruce, I don't know. I do see that a lot. There are a lot of agents that have that as a domain name or an email address. Yes, you can get a realtor domain name through NAR. I need to check on that to be sure. And the reason I say that is I know for Maximum One Greater Atlanta Realtors, several years ago, we had a go round with NAR on how to present that. And you have to have a comma, and then realtors must always be all capitalized, and you must have the little R in the circle that signifies it is a registered trademark. So that's using it as a name, as a trade name for our corporation. So regarding using it as a domain name or part of your email address, I do see it all the time. I have not interacted with NAR on that level to find out for sure. Great question. All right. Continuing on with general tips for professional communication, all forms, whether it be written or verbal, but especially this is more written, whether it's an email or a text message or a business card. You want, if you have a tagline or logo or branding, you want to include that on your email. And there are tons and tons and tons of software programs. You guys have all seen them. There are some people that have really, really, really cool email signatures. So that's a double-edged sword. Like there are some where it has their picture. I've seen some where their email signature at the bottom of their signature, it has movement. It has like a mini video that flips from their picture to their tagline, or it just has stars or something that's very, very eye-catching. So on one hand, that's really eye-catching and it's fun and it makes you smile and it's very memorable. On the other hand, depending on how the receiver is getting that email, there are some email programs, whether you're getting email on a Gmail account, a Yahoo account, Outlook, a GoDaddy email account, depending on the email account that you're receiving on your phone, so forth and so on. Sometimes those logos, taglines, fancy schmancy signatures don't always show up. Or it could be too taxing on taking up too much of memory on your phone. So you need to be really careful. There's a lot of email programs. Outlook is notorious for, it doesn't necessarily always show pictures. And so just be cautious when using that. But you do want to create a brand and brand yourself in order to be able to help people with their real estate needs. In all communication, You always need to be respectful, courteous, and polite. There are times when you need to be stern, but you can always be stern in a respectful manner. And I'm going to get into that a little bit later as well. Which source is better for a domain name? Any suggestions? I am not going to answer that with respect to this class. That would be something, if you guys have any domain name providers that you like, you can type them in the chat. But there are a lot, and I'm not going to endorse any one over the other. There are different prices, different packages that go with them, so forth and so on. I will say that, well, I'm not going to answer. Okay. Another thing, especially with us here in the South, from the South, if you've been in the South for a long time, when you are interacting with the public, with a co-op agent, with a broker, with a closing attorney, with a lender, with anybody within the purview of business, which is what we're talking about, you need to limit your physical touching in terms of endearment. It may be misperceived as completely inappropriate. And I can't tell you the number of times that agents say, well, I'm a hugger, so let me hug you. I don't care if you are a hugger or not. The person whom you are hugging may be extremely uncomfortable with you touching them. I don't care if you consider yourself a hugger or not. Go hug your family, go hug your friends. Do not necessarily hug someone in a professional setting, especially when you are first meeting them or just getting to know them for the first few times you are interacting with them, or even if you have know them and all of a sudden you're in a different setting. They might be completely uncomfortable and it might be completely inappropriate. Additionally, don't pat others. That it can be extremely patronizing. It can come across as condescending. A lot of times, you know, you'll pat someone on the leg, on the shoulder, on the head, and you're like, it's okay, I'm here, I got you, it's okay. But it comes across as condescending. Think about it. How does an adult comfort a child? Usually it's with a pat. They're there, it's okay, little one. A pat, and then like a couple little pats and then a rub. They're there, little one, it's okay, it's okay. Either I'm going to take care of this for you because I am the all-powerful, great knowing one, and you don't know what you're talking about, you're immature, so forth and so on. Or this is completely unfounded. Your tears, your concern, your worry is stupid. They're there, it's okay. It can come across as extremely patronizing and condescending, and negatively. And then the very Southern, bless your heart. And we all know the many ways that phrase can be interpreted here in the South. So just be very careful. And remember, when you are in a professional situation, your communication is different than when you are communicating with family and friends. Additionally, you need to communicate evenly. That was the best word I could come up with when interacting with couples. That could be a couple, could be a married couple, significant others. It doesn't matter the gender of the people. It could even be best friends. It could be inadvertently perceived as flirting with one of the parties over the other party. And even if it's not perceived as flirting in an inappropriate manner, it could also communicate that you, as the real estate agent, believe that one person, if you talk more to one person when interacting with a couple rather than both of them evenly, like asking one person questions more so than the other person, it can very readily be perceived that you believe one person is the power person or the control person or the smart person. Now that could be, but in your communication in that situation, don't do that because you are going to forego the opportunity to help these people with their real estate needs if one of the parties says, well, gosh, they only talk to you, they never talk to me. We're going to go find another agent who will treat me with the same respect that they're treating you with. I have seen it happen a number of times. Don't use lingo. The term CMA. Well, what on earth does a CMA mean? If you're on a listing appointment and you're trying to come up with a listing price, for those of you agents who have been licensed since 2020, there are things considered overpriced listings that don't sell. Might not be your experience in the past couple of years, but just so you know, coming up with a listing price is definitely can be an issue, a communication with a seller, and as the market continues to cycle, that will definitely continue, will be more and more of an issue. But back to my admonition about don't use lingo. So let's say you're on a listing appointment and you're trying to convey to the seller what list price they should use. Well, you might say, well, the CMA shows blah, 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 blah. CMA, what on earth is that? Country Music Awards? How did we start talking about country music? I thought we're talking about selling my house. So not everybody knows that CMA stands for comparative market analysis or competitive market analysis. Use the words, think if you're on the other side, use the words that people will understand. And sometimes you might have to define it, not in a condescending manner. So for example, I taught a contracts class. This was a couple of years ago. And in the Georgia Association of Realtors contracts, when it is talking about earnest money, and I'm sure all of you are aware of this, in the section of earnest money, there is a section where the buyer, the broker, the holder of the earnest money is already in possession of the funds at the time the buyer is writing the offer. The more common scenario we see in contracts nowadays is that in the verbiage is the buyer to remit earnest money to the holder within, and there's the fill in the blank number of days from binding agreement date. Well, that's what the contract says. Buyer to remit earnest money, blank number of days from binding agreement date. It's in the RE forms contract too. And it was several years ago, just a couple years ago, I was teaching a class and I had an agent that raised their hand and they said, at the risk of sounding stupid, what does remit mean? I have no idea what that means. And I was, number one, it made me stop and think about my communication when I am presenting a contract, a contractual issue to an agent, to a co-op agent, and to help agents communicate the terms of a contract to a buyer or a seller. So number one, it made me stop and think. And number two, the other issue is the fact that that agent had the courage to raise their hand. This was an in-class class, raise their hand and ask that question in person. Usually when one person has a question, more than one person has a question. It's just that that person had the courage to ask it in front of everybody. So what I've started teaching is, so what I've started doing in things like that, where there is vocabulary that is more lingo or just might be at something that somebody might not understand. So what I've started teaching when I'm interacting, I don't sell anymore. I don't interact with the public anymore in a sales situation. I'm what's called a non-competing broker, meaning I don't compete with my agents for listings or buyers. I just broker, manage, and teach. But so what I train my agents to say is, when you're going through that part of the contract where it says buyer to remit earnest money to holder within blank number of days of binding agreement date. Remit is just a fancy word for send. So what that means is, buyer, you are responsible for making sure that the holder is in possession of that earnest money within so many days. So you just sort of explain what that means without making them feel stupid. And don't try to impress, just communicate. You don't need to use fancy words just to show how knowledgeable you are. People just want you to communicate with them. Next point, never ever say anything about anyone or about anything that you would not say to anyone. Remember that you may always be being recorded at any time. Everyone now has a cell phone with them. That cell phone has a tape recorder and a video recorder. And clients whom you think are your bestest friends, when push comes to shove, if there is an issue and there is money on the line, they may have inadvertently recorded you without your knowledge and use that against you. Number one. Number two, when you buyer's agents, when you are at a house and you are showing property, don't say anything negative about that house for a couple of reasons. Let's say it has the old 80s wallpaper borders. Well, number one, the sellers may have their house monitored where they can hear everything you're saying. They may have baby monitors. They might have a fancy Ring doorbell or something like that. They might have a tape recorder set up. They might have a dash cam set up in their house. They can hear what you are saying about their house. Not only that, you might walk in and say, oh my gosh, can you believe they still have that 80s wallpaper border? Your client could actually love 80s wallpaper borders. I happen to love 80s wallpaper borders. So you never know about your taste in a property, or what you would have for your home might not be what your client would have. And if your client says something negative about it, you would just, in that example, you would say, well, it's wallpaper, you can take it down to your taste or something like that. But again, just remember, you are always being recorded, and never say anything behind someone's back that you would not say to their face. And we've all seen or heard the phrase keyboard warrior. There's a lot of people on Facebook comments and YouTube comments and Instagram comments and forums that will say something extremely negative, condescending, just plain old mean, that they would never say to somebody's face. So just remember that. And then baby monitors. There's a lot of sellers that have baby monitors. They want to know who's going in their house, and they want to hear what someone's saying. You're not necessarily listening for something negative. They want to hear if this buyer might write them an offer or things for a negotiating position. Okay, here is another huge text. This, I promise you guys, this will save you. If nothing's an issue until it's an issue, but when it's an issue, you are going to thank me for this tip. You always want to follow up verbal communication with an email. So you could have a long phone conversation with, for example, your client. Let's say you are going to terminate. Let's say your client is outside of all their contingencies, and for whatever reason, they have to terminate a contract, and you need to explain to them all of the possible consequences of them terminating. For example, they could lose their earnest money. They could owe the broker's commission for being in default of the contract, so forth and so on. So when you are having that verbal discussion with your clients, you always want to follow up with an email, and verbal communication can be a phone call or a text. You're going to send them an email after you hang up the phone and says, just to summarize the nature of our conversation, blah, 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 blah. You always want to end that email with, If this summary differs from your understanding of the nature of our conversation, please let me know. And then here's the key. Otherwise, this confirms that we are in agreement. Why is that important? If you just send them an email that says, here's the nature of our conversation, da, 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 da. If you don't invite them to respond back saying, no, 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 I thought you said this, not that, or yep, that's what we, if they don't email you back, you cannot necessarily take that as they understood it. That's why it's really key to put, if this summary differs from your understanding of the nature of our conversation or the content of our conversation, please let me know. Otherwise, this confirms we are in agreement. That way, if they don't email you back, you have something that at least will justify your position. If you, let's say you send a TNR, they're in default and they're going to lose their earnest money, and they come back and say, I didn't realize I was going to lose my earnest money. And you're going to say, well, not only do we have a conversation, I sent you that as an email, and you never let me know that it was other than what we had discussed. As a matter of fact, I specifically pointed that out. All right, now let's move on a little bit more specifics with written communication. Again, the general tips we just went over, that's for all communication, written and verbal. So I want to talk a little bit about email, text, and then your online website and social media. Again, make sure you use your name, your title, your company, contact information, cyber fraud warning. So let me talk about these. I do have attached at the very end of these slides. And again, I'm going to put in the, hang on one second. I'm going to put in the chat again where you can get these handouts. And I'll show you when we come back from the break. I think I'll walk you through how to get the handouts. But the handouts is an outline of these slides, as well as the GREC, Georgia Real Estate Commission license laws on marketing and advertising. I do have those also at the end of these slides, and I'm not going to go over those specifically in this presentation. We do cover those in the license law CE class that we teach, which satisfies the GREC requirement for license law. But just know that there are license laws that you as a real estate agent must adhere to, my pleasure, must adhere to when you are communicating. Whether it be, well, especially in writing, whether it be you're marketing yourself, marketing a specific property, so forth and so on. So I do have an attachment for that, so you can be current with that. But you're going to want to include your company and then your contact information, as we stated. Now, the cyber fraud warning. Real estate is a profession, is an industry. All types of real estate, from agents to brokers to closing attorneys to lenders, where we are ripe for cyber fraud. There are lots of bad guys out there that monitor your email. They see that you are a real estate agent. Bruce at alpharettarealtors.com kind of indicates that you're in real estate. Houses Are Us, Dana at housesareus.com kind of communicates that I'm a real estate agent. Such and such closing law firm kind of indicates it's a closing attorney. The bad guys, what they do, you guys, they are monitoring your emails and your email communication. They're not monitoring your phones. They're not monitoring anything sent in the mail, but they are monitoring your email. So they see your real estate agent. They just sit there and watch and watch and watch. And then all of a sudden they'll see an email that says wire instructions, and they'll see who you're emailing to. They'll see co-op agents. They'll see your public people. And then what they will do is they will spoof your email, spoof your phone number, because they'll do it by text also. And then they will send the buyer a change in wire instructions. They'll send a seller a change in wire instructions because sellers are wiring their proceeds, so forth. And what happens is the bad guys are stealing thousands, tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars online via wire fraud. And once it's gone, it's gone. So you have got to include a cyber fraud warning on your email signature. And you also have to have that discussion. How can they see your email and text messages? They see your emails because they are, they're monitoring your emails. There's all kinds of ways your emails get hacked, but not only that, your phone number gets spoofed. So I'm telling you to include your phone number on your email, which you need to do for business, but the bad guys see that. They see your phone number, they spoof your phone number, they see your clients, they see the email that you're sending clients to, they can access your documents. And we had one situation 2 years ago where we had a buyer and they had to wire something like $80,000 to the closing attorney for their down payment and closing costs. And our agent, thank goodness, had repeatedly warned them about not to trust any wire information that came across in an email or in a text message. She printed out the wire instructions, physically handed them to her client. Well, a couple days before closing, the client gets a text message from the phone number of the closing attorney. And that client looked up, went online, went to Google, looked up the phone number of the closing attorney. It was the closing attorney's phone number. And it said, hey, this is such and such closing attorney. We have a change in the wire. We've had a change in our accounts. Here are new wire instructions. Please wire your payoff, your down payment to this account rather than that account. Thank goodness our client had paid attention to our agent. She called the client called the agent and said, hey, I just got a text message from such and such closing attorney with a change in wire instructions. And it was a complete bad guy trying to steal the money. So if you guys will pay attention, in the GAR contract and in the RE forms contract, it says you will never receive wire instructions via email. It says that in the contracts. So you guys need to include those in your email addresses. A lot of closing attorneys are not emailing wire instructions. It's the emails that are getting hacked. So you need to pick them up in person and physically hand them to your buyers when you first meet them and your sellers, or you need to stick them in the US mail and send them. And same thing, never be the messenger between a closing attorney and a public person for wire instructions. Cyber fraud, it's real estate agents getting hacked, closing attorneys getting hacked, and lenders getting hacked. Use spell check and grammar check. There are a number of programs for text messages and for emails. Don't just whip off an email with incorrect spelling or incorrect grammar. That is going to send a message to your public that, number one, you didn't care enough to take the time to reread your email and go through it. And number two, that you don't use proper grammar and don't use spell check. Now, there are, when I went through school, grammar was hammered into me for years and years and years. And my husband sometimes accuses me of speaking and writing things a little too formally. And I see some of my own agents on this class. And if you've ever received an email from me, or some of you who have watched my videos on YouTube, there are times that my grammar is a little more formal. And part of that is it has just been ingrained in me from a very young age. So you don't need to specifically, thank you. You don't need to specifically never end a sentence with a preposition and things like that. But you definitely want to make sure that your sentence is cohesive and meaningful. It is not glaringly using incorrect grammar. And spell check's just an easy thing. Misspelled words, are, you know, a sure sign. It just detracts from your professionalism. Next tip for email in real estate. If you have to send an email that is potentially confrontational or in response to an upsetting scenario, don't hit send right away. So let's say you are interacting with a client or a co-op agent. Usually it's a co-op agent, and they have said something that has upset you or angered you or is completely incorrect, just completely burferish, and you need to correct them. Don't just whip out an email and hit send, because that email written from an emotional point of view could have a negative impact on the remainder of your working relationship when it doesn't necessarily need to be negative. So go ahead and write the email, but then walk away for at least 30 minutes or sleep on it overnight before you hit send, or have somebody else read it and say, what do you think of this? If you received this email, how would that impact you? But again, especially if it is confrontational or emotional, just take a breath. All right. Texting. Oh my goodness, my goodness, my goodness. Yeah, especially when a co-op agent is not doing their job. Cool down first. And I've got a few more hits on that a little bit later, David, but you're exactly right. You need to just don't hit send immediately. All right, texting. You guys, please refrain or limit your texting in a professional setting. In real estate, text is not considered written communication. Why do I have that there? Well, in the contracts, you'll see that the terms of notice in the GAR contract and in the RE forms contract, if it's another contract, it might have different terms for notice. But in those two contract sets, which is two contract packages, which are the two most widely used contract packages, when it talks about notice, it says notice must be in writing, legible, and signed by the party sending notice. So text messages are not considered written communication. And if you think about it, how do you send a text? Well, you send it on your cell phone. So you're sending it on a phone, and then just printing out text messages onto an email is not necessarily considered written communication. Now, can text messages help prove your point if you are in, for example, an ethics hearing, or an arbitration, or dealing with GREC, or even interacting with your broker or another broker? Perhaps that might add to the whole story or the whole scenario of what's going on. But just know that per a contract for notice, text is not considered written. I do not believe a text message is considered written by the Georgia courts, but I won't swear to that, and I am not an attorney. Agents text all the time. I get that. There is a time and a place for text. So perhaps you want to text with a co-op agent to check if a property is available. Or if you send an offer and you say, did you receive my offer? Or to confirm an appointment, either with a co-op agent or with your own client. You definitely do not want to do any negotiations by text. Well, my buyer will offer this. Well, my seller counters back at this. None of that it will hold up for anything. Number one, it's not considered in writing. And number two, none of that is signed by the actual buyer or seller. Additionally, do not use emojis when texting clients and co-op agents. Your emojis, number one, is not always professional. Number two, emojis can be completely misinterpreted and kill the deal for you, ruin the relationship for you, and can just completely be misinterpreted. So what do I mean by that? Well, we had a situation where we had an agent working with a buyer, and they lost out on how they wrote an offer. It was a multiple offer situation, lost it, Wrote an offer, multiple offer situation, lost it. Wrote an offer, multiple situation, lost it. They finally wrote an offer and their offer was accepted. So the agent got a binding contract back. And when the agent was so excited and knew that the buyer was going to be so excited. It was a male agent and a female buyer, and sent a text message to the buyer saying, woohoo, we finally got one or got it or something like that. And then used the winky emoji, the little smiley face with the winky sign. Next thing, I get a phone call. First I get an email and then I get a phone call from that buyer. Terminated the contract on due diligence, terminated the buyer brokerage agreement, and wanted to send an ethics, have the request an ethics hearing on my agent. And I'm like, what on earth happened? And I asked my agent what happened. And that was the story, is this buyer had lost out. He thought she would be so excited that she finally got a property under contract. She loved the house, so forth and so on. Well, what happened was the buyer, the female buyer, interpreted that winky emoji as completely inappropriate, as a sexual advance from my agent to the buyer. And his interpretation was, woohoo, we got it. And just wink like, yes, they were together. They got it. They finally got it. And it completely killed the deal. So you've got to definitely do not use emojis. There are sometimes, let's say you have regular text communication with somebody and you always end with 2 exclamation points and like, good morning, with 2 exclamation points. And then all of a sudden you get an email, that a text message, and it doesn't have those exclamation points. Well, what goes on in your head? Oh my gosh, what have I done? Why is this person upset with me? Why are they mad at me? They're not mad at you. They just forgot to put the 2 exclamation points. So when you are texting, please text your family, text your friends, text your loved ones. Use emojis all day long, use GIFs all day long. But when you are in a professional setting, do not text and do not use emojis. They are too, and don't use the abbreviations too, like SMH. Well, what on earth does SMH mean? Just like using the lingo. I don't want to ask you what that means. I don't want to look stupid. So just, I don't use shorthand when dealing in a professional relationship. You guys, your commissions are thousands and thousands of dollars. Act like you are interacting in a multi-million-dollar business, because you are, and you just want to be professional, respectful, and a little more formal. Now, you don't want to be formal to the point where you're making your client feel uncomfortable if they aren't as formal as you, but you need to retain that air of deserving of respect and professionalism and esteem. Now, what happens when your client, and you'll see a little bit later on, when your client says, I prefer text? Again, text without using emojis, without using shorthand, without using abbreviations, text, but then follow up with an email or a phone call. Now, let's continue on with online communication, your website and your social media presence. Again, see general tips. Include your photo or your logo. There are a lot of people that want to include your photo, and that's fine, or their team photo or so forth and so on. If you don't use a logo, that's fine too. If not, use your company's logo. You don't have to do that, but again, you are just really trying to create an ongoing branding experience for your person, so that anytime your public is seeing your name or an email, they are connecting you with real estate. You are, remember, this is business communication. So That's why I am saying that you always want to try and make the connection for your public person between you and real estate, because you never know when they have business or they know of somebody that has business that you can help. And you want their top of mind awareness, their top of mind connection with you to be that with the business that you are in. So a photo or a logo helps. Also, when you have now an agent website, that's going to be, you're going to have your IDX reciprocity, where you're going to have listings, you're going to have an about me section, you're going to have areas where you specialize, you're going to have a section on past customer testimonials, you might have a section on tips and tricks, home maintenance, what to look for when hiring an agent, so forth and so on. But there might be a place on your agent website when it's the About Me section, or definitely on your social media, where you do want to be professional, but you want to intermix some personal information, but don't be too personal. And I have a lot of agents where they'll have a Facebook page or an Instagram site, and they will go off on something political or something potentially contentious or in the mood, in the in the news. And I encourage you to avoid politics, avoid contentious topics in your social media presence. And you might say, well, that's who I am, and I'm on Facebook anyway. Well, you need to consider that if you're going to be in real estate, if you are going to take a stance with something political or something extremely contentious or something divisive, that you are going to alienate a lot of people who would otherwise do business with you. And if you want to have a social media presence where you want to go off and have a very, very strong stand politically, then maybe you don't want to be in real estate. Maybe you don't want to be in a profession where you interact with the public. Or just know you are going to alienate a lot of people and not get business. And you might get some negative Google reviews or negative comments that you might not be able to get rid of, that has nothing to do with your business, but is going to get attached to you as a real estate agent. But you do want to make yourself real. So you would include hobbies or pets or charities or some interests or family. Some people put pictures of their family. Some people keep their family totally off their social media presence. And I know, like on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube, so forth and so on, you can have a separate personal page from a business page. But remember, people can do a good job of finding you, and everything tends to be interlinked. So if you have a business page where you don't mention any politics, you don't even mention your hobbies or your pets, people will search you and they will find your personal page. But when you have pets or hobbies or things like that, it also makes you a little bit, as I said, more real, more approachable, and people understand that you are a real person and this is what you do. Yeah, photo. So the thing about the photo, there are times when, I don't know why, real estate as a profession for so many years has had agents including their photos on business cards and so forth and so on, a lot more than everybody else. And, some people don't want to include a photo. Some people do. And just like Katie is saying in the comment, sometimes a photo is really nice, because especially in this day and age where there are people that are a lot more wary or leery of interacting with strangers, sometimes if you see a photo of that person online before you meet with them, you'll know when you're meeting with them that is that person. Even if any of you guys have ever had to have glass replaced, like a car windshield replaced with I think it's Safe Light, because they will send a glass repair person to your home or your place of business. they always send an email with that person's photo before that person comes to your house. So when somebody shows up at your house, you know it is that employee and the company did send them. So that is one tip for including your photo. Again, in all your online communication, you always want to be professional. You always want to present yourself as an expert. Now, being an expert doesn't necessarily mean you have to know everything, but you would always want to present yourself as, if I don't know it, I've got resources that I can share with you or where I can find it. And then you want to pose intriguing questions. For example, you might want to do a Facebook post that says something to the effect of, wow, the real estate market is really changing. Would you be interested to find out how much your home would sell for on today's market? If so, contact me, let me know. That's a pretty intriguing question. A lot of times you will hear in real estate seminars a call to action. That would be a quote unquote call to action. You want to do something to prompt someone to get in touch with you. And then again, adhere to GREC license laws on media and advertising. All right, we're going to do a couple more things and then we're going to take a break. Communication when there is a potential issue. Let's see. Okay, yeah, we're going to do this. I'm going to cover this, some points of practice, and then how to deal with a feisty real estate agent, and then we're going to take a break. So when there is an issue or a potential issue, for example, you know the deal is going south, or you are starting to lose the relationship with your own client, or somebody sends you an email or a phone call that says, hey, I'm going to turn you into GREC. I'm going to file a complaint with GREC. I'm going to file an ethics violation. I'm going to call your broker. I'm going to take this to court. I'm going to take this to arbitration. Whenever you get the sense or the information that there is an issue or a potential issue, this is what I suggest you do. Sit down, get rid of all distractions, and write a log. Just pull out a piece of paper or do it online, in Word or whatever software you use to type. Write out a log. Do it in chronological order. Start from the very beginning of the interaction, of the transaction. If it is a client that says they are unhappy with you, start with how, when, and where you met that client. If it is a co-op agent, then start with the beginning of that transaction and your interaction with the co-op agent. Put in dates and times. Put in the sequence of events, the summary of the communication, documents that were presented and signed. So for example, let's say on Monday, September 5th, I went and showed the property at 123 Lucky Street. Later on that evening, I wrote an offer on behalf of my buyer and I emailed it to the listing agent. Blah, blah. You start at the very beginning, and then it would be something like, on Thursday, September 22nd, I had a conversation with the listing agent regarding the inspection or the appraisal, blah, 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 blah. I sent them an amendment to address concerns with the property. The seller never responded back, something like that. You just put in a sequence of events, summary of the communication. The listing agent said this on the phone. I followed up with an amendment and they never signed the amendment. Then any and all documents that you did either sign or presented or were initiated, you want to attach those as part of this. In this situation, you do want to pull copies of all emails and text messages. Again, as I said, a text message won't necessarily hold up in court, but it can be supportive of supporting your position with respect to a contentious or issue where there might be some miscommunication. Then what you want to do, you want to sign your notes and have them notarized. So you want to go find a notary public and sign this in front of the notary. Why? Because these notes, your recollection of this log, is going to be notarized with the date that you had it notarized. So let's say all that happened in September. We are now, we were scheduled to close the end of October, whatever. It is now Tuesday, October 25th. And you wrote all this out last night. You went and found a notary public today. You had these notarized. The date stamp of the notary public is today, October 25th. Then you're going to put these away in a safe place, whether that be online, in your digital transaction management system, somewhere in your email, online, in cloud storage, wherever. Why are you going to do this? Well, GREC investigations, as of right now, they are 12 to 18 months behind from when they first get notified of a request for investigation. Ethics hearings through GAR are 3 to 12 months behind from when the person actually does initiate a request for an ethics hearing. Arbitration or litigation, it completely depends on the nature of the situation, the court of competent jurisdiction, so forth and so on. Well, let me tell you, a year and a half from now, you are not going to remember names, dates, issues, conversations. You're not going to remember any of that. And if you try to reconstitute that issue then, that could be just how you recall it now, given that you have to defend yourself. But if you are in a GREC investigation or an ethics hearing or facing arbitration or litigation, and you whip out these notes and they were notarized back from a month ago, or I'm sorry, a year and a half ago, then that can demonstrate that that pretty well was your recollection at the time when it happened, and not just how you conveniently perceive the situation now that you are under the gun. Honestly, that is ridiculous, is the comment. I'm telling you, I have had a couple of agents where these notarized notes from a year ago had them keep their license rather than losing their license and had them not pay a fine. All right, points of practice, real estate specific. Have a specific seller and buyer package. You guys, don't reinvent the wheel with every buyer and seller, but have a package and include all, ridiculous time. Yeah, exactly. We are living in crazy times right now. Include all related customer brochures and disclosures. Now, here's another tip. You guys, include a sample purchase and sale agreement and write sample across it when you first meet with your seller or buyer. Why do I tell you to do that? Well, that way your seller and encourage your sellers and buyers to look over the contract, go over it and ask you any questions. Why? Well, when you're getting multiple offers or your buyer has finally found a house and they need to write an offer, they might be caught up a little bit more in the numbers and the emotions of the situation rather than really understanding what it is that they are signing. And whether that be a purchase and sale agreement, I also suggest, well, you're going to have a listing agreement and a buyer brokerage agreement signed. But that way, that gives them time to read it when they're not having to make decisions or negotiate it, but they can go through and ask you questions as to the nature of what they will be agreeing to and the consequences of when they sign a contract to sell their house or to buy a house. Additionally, you want to get contact information of clients and customers, their phone, their email address, and their mailing address. You are going to want to include that in your buyer brokerage agreement, in your seller brokerage agreement, and you're going to want to make sure that your broker has a copy of that because if something were to happen to you, or a lot of people use the example that you're in an accident. I like using happier examples. Let's say you're on vacation and you don't have access to email or phone, but there is an issue or some information where your broker needs to get in touch with your client. We need to have a way to get in touch with them. So your broker always needs phone, email, and mailing address. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to include that on a purchase and sale agreement. And in the GAR purchase and sale agreement, it clearly states that if you are working with a public person as a client, then your contact information serves as notice to the client. So you don't need their email address and phone number and mailing address on a contract if you are interacting with them with a client, but your broker will need it. Okay, so Chip's question is, if you were never notified about a GREC investigation tomorrow, and then the commission reaches out to you a year from now, how would you be prepared? Again, you will get a sense. Usually nothing comes out of the blue. Usually a request for investigation with GREC or an ethics investigation usually does not come out of the blue. You will know when the deal is turning south. You will know when you are having issues with the co-op agent. You will know when you're having issues with the buyer. So I'm not saying to do that on every single transaction, just on transactions where you're getting a sense that something is going a little wonky or a little south, or like I said, someone says, hey, I'm going to turn you into GREC. That's when I'm suggesting you sit down and write a log of your notes. Oh, ridiculous about GREC being that far behind. Yeah. Oh, totally agree. So I'm trying to interpret your comment, Chip. Yes, it is. GREC is, yep, 18 months behind. They do not have enough staff. If you go to GREC's website, they are looking, they're hiring positions for investigators and a lot of other staff. But yes, they are extremely behind. They do not have enough staff working to field these complaints. All right. Let's move along. Again, when you're dealing with your clients and customers, you want to ask for their preferred method of communication. And I've already addressed this. If they say text is their preferred method, that's great, but don't negotiate by text, and always follow up with a phone call and an email if it is something that has to do with money, with the negotiations, with time frames, so forth and so on. But you could text them and say, hey, I got an offer. I want to present it to you. When would be a good time to call? Hey, I got a counter offer, so forth and so on. Hey, we got the contract. I'm going to email it to you. Just don't use the winky emoji. Always ask your clients, your public people, about their hours. What's the earliest I can reach out to you, and what's the latest I can reach out to you? Some of your public people are early morning people. They're like, oh, please, anytime before 8 a.m., between 7 and 8:30 a.m., that is the best time to get me. I haven't started work yet. You have my full attention, so forth and so on. Or they might say, no, I'm not an early person. I am a late person. You can contact me up to 1 a.m. So, you know, and others might be like, no, I'm in bed at 8 o'clock. Early is better. So you want to get a sense of the hours for communication with your public. And then you want to let the public know about your hours. So, nope. You can email me at 11 o'clock, but I am not going to email you back until tomorrow morning at 8:30, so forth and so on. And again, the cyber fraud warning that we have discussed. All right, tips for dealing with a feisty agent, and then we will take a break. We talked about this at the very beginning. There are sometimes when you are dealing with a co-op agent that it can just be extremely difficult to deal with them. Either they are potentially hard-headed, they're not hearing what you're saying, they are not as experienced as you are, they don't understand the contract, so forth and so on. Number one, y'all aren't going to like this one, but give them the benefit of the doubt. Why do I say that? Well, number one, everybody has a bad day. Number two, remember that you are both working towards the same outcome. Real estate is a really, really interesting profession. We've got two sides. We've got one broker that deals with the buyer and one broker that deals with the seller. But unlike something where you've got representation on two separate sides, like a court scenario or an arbitration scenario, both sides are working towards the same outcome. One person wants to sell the house and the other person wants to buy that house. So you are working towards the same outcome. And if the agents and brokers are aligned and keep that in mind, then together you can help the public overcome some bumps in the road. Are you on the same page? There, like that was just an example right there. So for example, in the comments of this video of this what am I thinking? Zoom presentation, one of the comments is, that's ridiculous. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm presenting something I think that's helpful. Why are you saying that's ridiculous? And then we're not on the same page. Then it comes out later on in the comment, no, the advice, hopefully, that I'm giving is not ridiculous. The fact that GREC is that far behind in investigating issues is ridiculous. So now we're both on the same page, and I agree, rather than being defensive, oh my gosh, how can you say this, that part of my presentation is ridiculous? No, that's not what he meant at all. So again, are you on the same page? Are you talking about the same issue? Are you talking about this? Yep, there, Chip says exactly. Okay, so now we're on the same page. Perfect example. So thank you so much, Chip. And that also has to do with written communication versus interactive communication. So sometimes your co-op agent, you're not talking about the same things. You could be talking about dealing with repairs, and your co-op agent could be talking about appraisal contingencies. You're talking about contingencies and terminations and prices, and you're talking about prices, and the listing agent is thinking, well, gosh, it's price, you know, we're under contract pretty high and the comps aren't going to show that. And now my buyer has to pay this much for repair. So you're not necessarily on the same page. And then also consider that an agent's comments or questions are really from their client. You're hired to represent your client. And you might be a stronger agent, a more experienced agent, a more knowledgeable agent than your co-op agent. And sometimes your agent might not be as strong as you are, or might not have the relationship with their client that they should have. And so sometimes an agent's comments are reflective of their clients, and they don't really know what to say back to their own client. Well, you might need to give them the words or the information to speak to their client that they may not have on their own. So Dana, what do you mean by that? Well, for example, let's say you are dealing with a co-op agent that is representing a buyer, and the buyer wants to terminate the contract and they're outside of all their contingencies. Well, that buyer's agent might not be aware of, you know, and they're like, well, yeah, they're willing to give up the earnest money. Who cares? They want to walk away. Well, what that co-op agent, the co-op agent doesn't want them to terminate. You don't want them to terminate. Your seller does not want them to terminate. What your co-op agent might not understand is it's not just giving up the earnest money. Both brokers may pursue them for the commission they would have earned had it closed without a default. So you might need to point that out to your co-op agent, and point that out specifically in the contract, that paragraph. And without embarrassing your co-op agent, say, gosh, you know, I hate that they're feeling that way, but you know, you said they're willing to give up the earnest money. That might be true, but it's not just the earnest money. We're talking about tens of thousands of dollars that they could also lose in a lawsuit and have a judgment filed against them, a public judgment against them. And you're going to say, obviously, or, you know, let me show you, let me remind, you don't want to say, let me show you, because that comes across as a bit condescending. You want to say something like, let me remind you of where this is in the contract. And perhaps you can remind your buyers of that. And again, you're sort of getting your agent off the hook with words to help them make their case, or your case, to their own clients when they might not be as strong as you are. If they are just having a bad day, consider that, you know what, if they only do a few deals a year, let's say the average, I believe it's still the NAR average, is the average agent does 4 deals a year. That means that your transaction that might be falling apart represents 25% of their income. That's a pretty big deal to them. Sometimes that is creating a lot of stress and pressure on them that has nothing to do with this one particular deal, but does have to do with 25% of their income. And it's a lot easier to vent to you and be angry with you than it is to be angry with their own client. Like, let's say the buyer is thinking about terminating outside of all contingencies, or even if it is within the contingencies. and they're mad at their buyer. Well, they're not going to go off on their own client, because then they certainly won't keep them as a client or get referrals. So sometimes it is easier for a co-op agent to vent to you rather than their own client. Is it the right thing to do? No, but could it be true? Possibly. And again, perhaps that agent is inexperienced with that particular issue and just freaking out. Now, this one is one I really want you to think about. I want you to consider that your co-op agent is also your client, in addition to your public person. Why do I say that? Well, you have a higher likelihood that you are going to do another deal with this co-op agent way before you're going to do another deal with your client. Now, the national average used to be that people buy and sell every 7 years. That was the average. Those numbers are definitely being lengthened in this market right now. There are a lot of sellers that have, instead of buying another house, they are remodeling their house. We have a lot of people that are staying in their houses and not selling them as often. Even with a lot of businesses offering their employees to work remotely from a remote position, there are a lot of people that are buying houses in an area that they love and their potential retirement area. They're buying houses in the mountains, they're buying houses at the beach, they're buying houses a little bit further from the hustle and bustle of the city and traffic, so forth and so on, because they're still able to work from that remote location and they're staying in those houses more often. So again, there is a higher likelihood that you're going to interact with this co-op agent more. So if you start off a transaction with the perception that your co-op agent is your client in addition to your public person, number one, you're going to talk to a client a little bit differently than you're going to talk to an agent who's quote unquote on the other side. And number two, when you do have roadblocks and bumps and hurdles along the way, together you will work through them to get your public through that situation. And then one more bonus tip that I don't have on here is when you are interacting with a co-op agent, this is even if they're not feisty, you want to refer to the buyer and the seller as the buyer and the seller. You want to avoid using possessive terms. You don't want to say, well, my buyer and my seller, because when it becomes possessive like that, it becomes more potentially confrontational and a potential winner versus loser. Whereas if you refer to, well, the buyer, the seller, then that sort of aligns you and the co-op agent on the same side, and the public people are on the other side, rather than you and your buyer on one side and the other agent and the seller on the other side. You and the agent are on one side as the professionals and the public people are on the other side. So just a couple of tips and tricks. I am going to stop the share for now, and we are going to take a break. So let me pause the recording. All right, everybody. So welcome back from the break. We are going to, before I continue on, there was one question about where is a good cyber fraud warning for your email address. And my suggestion is you are more than welcome to copy mine if you want. If you ever get an email from me, my suggestion is definitely you will want to contact your broker and get one from your broker. Find one from your favorite closing attorney and copy and use theirs with their permission. And you probably could even go to Google and Google cyber fraud warning email signature for real estate and get one there. Actually on mine, I can't do it in this, I don't think. But on mine, I went to Google and I actually found there's a little graphic of a sign. It looks like a real estate yard sign and it says cyber fraud warning. It's kind of cute. I thought it was cute. So I actually used that on one of my email signatures. A couple of other things I just want to address before we go on to some specifics is communication in general, nonverbal communication. There's all kinds of ways we communicate, and one of those could be with how we dress and how we smell. Can be a little bit tricky to talk about, but let me talk about dress first. You always want to dress professionally, and one of the the survey is not required. But one of the things about dressing is you always wanted what I always have been taught from my mentors and coaches coming up in real estate, and what I tend to try and convey to my agents is you want to dress like the commission that you want to earn. And what do I mean by that? Be professional. If you are earning thousands of dollars in commission, you want to dress like a professional. If you went to, well, just put yourself on the other side too. If you're doing business, let's say you have to go to an attorney, and you go to the attorney, and the attorney is wearing flip-flops and cut-off denim shorts, or yoga pants and a graphic t-shirt or a t-shirt or whatever. You right, wrong, or indifferent, you are going to have a perception about the professionalism of that attorney representing you. What kind of job is that attorney going to do? How respectful of they are you? How knowledgeable are they of you? So again, the way people dress in a professional situation does have an impact on the perception of others. And then smell too. And it's not only a bad smell, but don't come right from the gym without using deodorant to go interact with a client. But it's also a good smell. Don't use too much cologne or too much perfume. Number one, it can be overpowering. Number two, there are certain odors or scents that just irritate people, or it could remind your client of a past person that they might not have a good relationship with. So be very cognizant of how you smell and how you look. Now, I'm not saying to wear your $500 suit to every appointment that you go on. You want to dress appropriately too. So for example, let's say you're going to sell land and you're going to walk the land. Well, you're not going to wear your $500 suit and high heel pumps to go walk land. You're going to wear something more appropriate to that. But rather than wearing if you are going to wear jeans, wear nice jeans. Wear perhaps some khakis or some slacks and some boots, more than just jeans and a t-shirt. So you guys get my point. You always, and you can still be casual and professional. There's nothing wrong with wearing in the wintertime, for example, a sport coat and a pair of nice jeans or something like that. But you guys get what I mean. So I just wanted to talk about that. All right, we are going to continue on. We're going to get a little more specific with some tips and tricks and techniques. So we are going to continue on, and I'm going to go back to sharing my screen, and I'm going to continue on with PowerPoint. So I hope everyone is enjoying everything, and go back to the slideshow. All right. Switching gears just a little bit, we are going to now talk about building rapport. And building rapport, you will see there is a lot of information, articles, videos, books on building rapport, especially in a sales situation. And in essence, what rapport is people like and trust people who are like themselves. And that is the definition of rapport. The way to build rapport in a sales relationship, especially in real estate, is, well, in any sales relationship actually, is similar behaviors create familiar expectations, because people generalize all the time. And you must gear your communication in a way that appears familiar to them. in terms of verbal, vocal, and body language, those establish rapport much quicker and deeper than similar hobbies and experiences. It doesn't mean that you can only do business or only develop rapport with someone. For example, I like to knit. That doesn't mean I can only build rapport with people who knit. I like to read. I can't only build rapport with people who like to read. What if I want to do business with somebody that doesn't knit, that doesn't read? If I'm more of an extrovert, does that mean I can't build rapport with someone who's more of an introvert? The next slide I'm going to show you are techniques to build rapport with anybody, regardless of hobbies and experiences. It's not like, you like to fish, I like to fish, great, do business with me, then we're a perfect match. That's not what rapport is at all. So here is how you build rapport. And what you want to do is you want to use the techniques of mirroring, mimicking, and matching. Because again, what we're trying to do is create a familiar expectation or create familiarity with somebody in a way that they can expect a way to have a good interaction with you. So rate of speech, that's your tempo. That's either fast or slow. Tonality, that's if you talk more nasally like that, like I kind of talk through my nose, or more chesty, like I talk chesty, or throaty or breathy. Like if you think of Marilyn Monroe, her tonality would be more breathy, Mr. President. Inflection, that's your vowel sounds. Do you say pecan or pecan? Or no, I guess that would be pronunciation. Do you say tomato or tomato? Pecan or pecan? Do you have more of a Southern accent? Is it a really, really Southern accent? Or is it more of a Pakika and the Harvard Northern accent? Is there a foreign, do you have a foreign accent? And cadence, that's the musical quality. That means, do you sing sing-song like, hello, how are you? How are you doing today? Or hello, how are you doing today? Are you more robotic and where there's no emotion or inflection, or you're always like, thank you for calling. So glad to talk to you. You know, there's like little musical qualities to people's voices. And so when you're trying to build rapport, Cindy writes, a whole new set of talents being revealed. Thank you, Cindy. When you're building rapport with someone, you want to match these issues in their speech. And so rate of speech, because if you're opposite, you don't have rapport. So for example, if you are talking to someone or if you are a fast talker, and I talk very quickly, especially when I'm teaching, because I have a lot of information I'm trying to convey to you. Well, if you are in a situation where you're interacting with a client and you talk really, really, really fast and they talk slower than you, what is their perception? What is their perception? If you talk faster than they do, what is their first gut reaction perception of you? What is your first gut reaction of somebody that speaks faster than you do? You aren't listening to them. What else? Y'all type in the chat. Hurrying up, rushing, salesy. Yep, trying to get something past them. Sale. What are they? Why are they talking so fast? What are they trying to gloss over? Exactly. What it kind of, yes, convey it, yes, salesy, trying to pull something over on them, something or other. Not interested, not listening. Now, what if you are interacting with somebody who speaks a lot slower than you do? What is your gut reaction impression of them? If they talk a lot slower than you, yep. Type in the chat. What do you think of someone that talks a lot slower than you? Yep, not on their game, dumb, confused, not decisive Southern, not too bright, not too intelligent, confused, ineffective, distracted. Yes, watching their words, exactly. more deliberate. So there is a level of disconnect just right there in and of itself between the rate of speech. So if you normally talk fast and your client speaks a little bit slower, you need to make a concerted effort to slow the rate of your interaction, your communication with them. If you normally talk slow and your client talks a little bit faster, you're going to want to pick up the pace a little bit so that they don't think that you're slow or inexperienced or incapable of dealing with what they do. Also with this is interrupt. Be careful with interrupting. If you speak quickly and you are talking with someone who speaks slower, you have the tendency to interrupt them. I have been accused and I've found myself of interrupting people all the time. And it comes across as disrespectful, condescending, not listening to what they say because you already know it all. And you have to really catch your breath and let them finish their thought before you speak. So interruptions can really kill the communication and kill the relationship. Additionally, with building rapport is body language, your posture. You don't want to exactly mirror. Yes. Also, if you talk nonstop without dialogue, you come across as a know-it-all, and you don't have any respect for their opinion or what they have to say. Okay, body language, posture and gestures, facial expressions, shrugs, and head nods. Any shift in behavior, you want to mimic, mirror, and match that. But posture, if you're talking to someone and they lean forward, you don't want to lean forward immediately because all of a sudden it looks like you're copying them. But if they lean forward, you want to wait a few seconds and then lean forward. Gestures. If you're talking to someone and they have these wild hand gestures all the time, my husband always accuses me saying that if I could not move my hands, I would not be able to talk. So when they're doing gestures, you don't do gestures while you're watching, but you do gestures when you speak. Facial expressions, that is instant. And I can't, you guys all have experience with this. You cannot help when somebody is smiling, you will tend to smile. When somebody laughs, you will tend to laugh. When somebody is crying, if you watch them enough, you will end up tearing up. Is it okay to take notes during the conversation? Yes, absolutely. That's a great thing, is to take notes in the conversation. And you might want to even just say, hey, I'm going to take a few notes because I want to make sure to not miss anything that you're saying. So absolutely take notes. And then if you have notes, then you might want to refer to your notes and say, hey, I just wrote down some notes so I don't miss anything important that we need to discuss. Shrugs and head nods. And this is for any of you who have ever taken any sort of sales class, they always teach you when you're trying to get your client to say yes or sign a contract, you always shake your head up and down, because that will, again, inadvertently get them to shake their head up and down. I'm going to show you guys just a quick video while we're here on the emotions and mirroring and matching those. So let me show you this really quickly, but laugh. When again, so emotions are very contagious when used in communication. Can't hear. Oh, sorry. Okay. Anyway, I've got these videos linked for you at the bottom too. Now, also when dealing with emotions, there is a lot that comes across in communication emotionally. You need to notice where your client is, honor and appreciate where they are, and meet them where they are. And we all have experience with this. If you are in a great mood, everything is going great, you just got a deal through, you just had a closing, everything is going well in your life, you just got a bonus from a builder, you just got an amazing client that's easy to work with, you just got a great referral, things are going great at home, just whatever, you are just in an amazing mood, the weather is beautiful, you're just, everything is great. And then you come across somebody that's sad or upset or depressed or sad, you want to distance yourself from them. You're like, don't bring me down. I'm in an amazing mood. And you really don't want to deal with somebody that's sad. Same thing. If you are sad or depressed or stressed or angry, the last person you want to deal with is somebody that's in a great mood saying, woohoo, cheer up. Isn't life grand? Life is wonderful. You just want to slap that person. You're like, no, I'm having a horrible day. I'm having a terrible day. I'm in a terrible mood. And I don't want to hear your Pollyanna outlook on life. Life is not wonderful. Life is horrible right now, blah, blah, blah. So you have to really, really appreciate where they are. So if you're in a good mood and you're dealing with a client that is stressed or sad or upset, you don't want to say, hey, cheer up, it's all great. You don't want to ruin your bad mood, but you do need to take it down a couple of notches to match their emotion, and just don't be quite so exuberant. And same thing, if you're in a bad mood and they're up, don't tell them how horrible your life is and what's going on with you. All right, we're going to move on a little bit to what I call conversational objection handling. And basically, again, a lot of these things, these are all NLP techniques or neuro-linguistic programming techniques, which there are courses and courses and courses and books and books and books, and we could spend hours and hours and hours on this. The purpose of my introducing these techniques to you in the context of this class is, number one, to let you know what is out there and there are more resources available for you. Number two, there are, as I mentioned at the beginning, there are some of you that love scripts and dialogues. There are others that I don't like a script. I can't remember a script. If I try to memorize a script and I'm in the middle of one and I forget, then I'm really lost and don't know what to say. So this is a technique to help you as an agent have just a pattern with which to interact, to deal with an objection. And Christine writes in the comments, I also watched a podcast about FBI interviews a person to see if they're lying. The cues where they look as if they're saying they did something and shaking their head no, but yes, that is also part of NLP or neuro-linguistic programming. Part of it has to do with words and phrases, and which is what I'm going to talk about. There are other parts, and this became really popular. The eye movements and neuro-linguistic programming techniques became really popular, believe it or not, in the 70s. And you can Google it. You can Google eye movements and what they mean. And I don't know those by heart, but in essence, it's like if somebody looks to their upper left when they're talking, it means one thing. If they look to the upper right when they're talking to you, it means another thing. Lower left means another thing. Lower right means another thing. One means they're lying. One means it's truthful, but they're accessing a memory. One means they're trying to recall something. Anyway, it's really, really fascinating and interesting. And that is also part of, you'll hear it called NLP or neuro-linguistic programming. But this conversational objection handling, and then I've got two more techniques after this that we're going to talk about, are part of NLP. And again, I'm presenting it to you so you will have just know that there is a technique or a pattern. So the first thing is, when you hear an objection from a buyer or a seller or co-op agent or anybody, you want to paraphrase and repeat what they said. And then you want to give them massive approval for what they said. Massive approval doesn't mean you agree. It just means you hear their point of view. You want to use their name, ask a leading question, vaporize their objection or make your point, close for action, and be quiet. So that's the pattern. And let me show you what I mean. So when you want to paraphrase, you want to get, you don't want to repeat them necessarily word for word. You would just want to get the essence of their objection, their concern, or their question. It does indicate that you're listening, and it sort of buys you a little bit of time to process or think about what it is that they're saying and really assess their concern. Then you want to give a massive approval. So you don't always want to say good for you. Again, it depends on the context of the objection or their concern or their question. But you want to say something like, well, I can appreciate that. Or I understand how you might feel that way. I understand that that's, you know, I can appreciate how you came to that conclusion. Or thanks for sharing that. You want to make them okay for having an objection. You don't want to make them feel stupid because they don't understand. So for example, when I told you about the vocabulary when I was presenting a contracts class, and you know, when that agent said, well, what does remit mean? What does that mean? Oh, well, I can understand how you think that because that's not a word you use in everyday language. It's just a fancy word for send. So you want to make them not feel stupid for being vulnerable by asking a question. Thanks for sharing that. Great, super cool, groovy, interesting. Ouch. Oh my. Ouch is a good one when you want to communicate that you hear what they're saying, but they're incorrect. Like, well, why can't I just list my house? Everybody else, I just heard my neighbor got $80,000 over list price. Why can't I want to list my house for $80,000 over the last sale. You might say, ouch. So you hear what they're saying, but it's not necessarily approval or agreement with what they're saying because they missed the market. And then you want to use their name. You want to use people's names. And if you consider yourself a person who is bad with names, you need to stop right now and you need to make a concerted effort to remember people's names when you first meet them. There's lots of courses out there. There's lots of YouTube videos. There's lots of things you can do, but you need to start getting good with names. Number one, you're in sales, and that is a huge thing in sales. Number two, in a conversation, when you use someone's name, it captures their attention. It brings them back into the conversation. And I want you to consider that your name is the single most word you have heard your entire life. When you are a baby, people start with using your name or your nickname or whatever they call you. Hi, Dana. Oh, look at the Dana. Look at the sweet little girl. Hi, Dana. Dana. You do that with puppies too when you're training puppies. So absolutely, you want to get good as an agent of figuring out whatever it is you need to do to learn and remember people's names when you first meet them. Then you want to ask a leading question. What do I mean by a leading question? So you let them bring up their question. You give them approval, or you don't make them wrong for having an objection or a question or concern. But then you want to put in that you want to make them doubt that. So you want to say, well, do you realize how that could work against you? Like I see how, so for example, I want to list my house $80,000 over my neighbor's house. All my neighbors have sold for that. And you can say, wow, ouch. I can see how you think that. But do you realize how that could work against you? This is the pivot point between their concern, question, or objection and your answer to get what it is you want to get in this situation, the list price that you need to list it at for them to actually sell their house now in this market, not the market from last year. So here are a couple of leading questions. Do you realize how that could work against you? May I point out how that could be the worst possible choice for you? Would you be surprised to know how that could hurt you? because you phrase that leading question in a way, they're willing, it doesn't come across as confrontational. They're willing to listen. And this next section, this next prefix to what you're going to say or phrase also gives them the opportunity to listen to you without you making them wrong. Here's the thought. I mean, here's the thing. The real issue is, have you considered, and then close for action. I'm ready to sell your house. Put me to work. I want to do the job for you. Let's sign the paperwork. And then be quiet. You guys hang on one second. I'll show you an example of this. You want to be quiet. A lot of times, especially if you are a newer agent or you are dealing with a client in a much higher price range than you're used to dealing with, or somebody who's stronger than you, a lot of times you think that when you are dealing with objections, silence is a bad thing. Do not be so quick to keep talking when there is a point of silence. Number one, there might be silence in the actual interplay between you and the other person, but in their own head, there's no silence whatsoever. In their own head, they are having, they've had an objection. You've just given them a point for them to consider your point of view and how that's going to help them achieve their goal. And in their own head, they are processing what you have said. They are answering their own question. They're having dialogue in their own head. So it's quiet for you, but in their own head, it is not quiet at all. They are having a conversation with themselves. So, oh man. Okay, I'm going to do the power of questions and then I have some examples. So Katie asks, are there any tools for helping learn names? Just Google memory tips and tricks for learning names or memory tricks. There's a lot of information online and on YouTube. Okay, the power of questions. The most effective way to gain control in a sales situation is to ask questions. Ask questions to help you gain knowledge and information you need to present your services in a way that provides a solution for their problem. Use open-ended questions because those keep the conversation going and give you insights into their thoughts and concerns and ideas. Close-ended questions end the conversation. Different types of questions will direct one's focus. If you ask someone why, you have to be very, very careful when you ask why questions. Sometimes why questions can come across as very confrontational or accusatory, like, why did you do that? It can come across as very negative. But if you ask why in such a way with respect to real estate, like, you know, why is it that you're looking for a new home? Or why is it that you are looking for a master on the maid? That confirms purpose and motivating reason. How, if you ask how questions, that will lead you to a course of action to achieve the result or find a solution. And if you ask what if questions, that will sort of point them to the benefits of achieving their outcome or what their goal is, achieving their goal. You want to help your public people discover their own answers and then tie them into you and your services. For example, how is your next home going to be different from the current one? I'm glad we're talking. When you say, I'm glad we're talking, that is a subtle cue that says, so they're going to answer for themselves what they're looking for in their next home. When you then end what they say with, I'm glad we're talking, that anchors what they're looking for in the next home to you, that there is a benefit to talking to you because you're going to have them achieve their goal. Instead of telling someone something, you are going to turn it into a question. And if you guys will notice, there are a lot of times throughout this presentation that instead of my telling you something, I have said things like, consider this. So I've made it a question to ask you to consider what it is I'm saying rather than telling you what to do. Obviously, this is a class, so it's more instructive than in a situation where you're with a public person and you are trying to get them as a public seller or a public buyer or interact with a co-op agent. But here are some phrases to turn statements into questions. Could it be that? Do you realize that? Well, have you ever thought about what would happen if? Would it be okay if? Are you committed to? Would you be open to? Would it be okay if I showed you? What's important? And here are some questions to determine motivation. Hang on, I'm going to tie all this stuff together in a couple of examples in just a minute. What's important to you about having a master on the main? That's another way of asking a why question that's not quite so confrontational. I understand. And so I can help you better or understand your situation better. What's important to you about having a master on the main? Well, tell me more about that. Help me understand what's important to you about. What I hear you saying is, okay, good for you. So ultimately, when you have the answer to number one, answer number two, what will those have done for you? Could it be that, blah, 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 to get all that, would you be willing to meet with me, sign the contract, make an offer? I'm glad we're talking. Since it's not really about selling the home, but rather about having what master on the main or whatever it is their true motivation is, I'd like to spend about 15 minutes with you to talk about how we can move you closer to whatever they said their goal was. What is the best time for us to get together? Today at 3 or does tomorrow afternoon work better for you? Okay. Whew, that's a lot of information. Let me tie this all together in an example. I'm going to list with an agent. Let's say you are on an expired appointment. There's a house that was listed and now it's expired. Yes, expireds are coming back on the market and they are a great source of business for you listing agents because they have already communicated that they want to sell their house. So let's say you are trying to get an expired listing and their objection is that they're going to list with an agent who showed their house when it was on the market with another listing agent and left a card in there. So the objection is, I'm going to list with an agent who's already showed the house. Again, you're on a listing appointment or on the phone trying to get an appointment with an expired listing. And they say, nope, I'm just going to list with an agent who already showed the house. Here's your conversational objection handling. Well, that's interesting. So let me ask you a question. You're only going to work with agents who showed your home already to a buyer. Is that right? Dana, or whatever their name is. Is that right? So what's the advantage to you to consider agents who've already proven they cannot sell your home? I mean, let's face it, they've had a buyer, they've seen your home, and they didn't sell it. I appreciate what you're saying here because you're probably thinking, wait a second, if they showed my home while it was listed for sale, maybe they're a good person to talk to, right? Well, Dana, I don't care. Even if you don't list your home with me, may I tell you why that could be the worst way to choose an agent? See, what happens is this. There are some agents who just kind of go around constantly showing homes. But while they're out showing other agents' listings, who's taking care of their listings? I mean, wouldn't you want the agent that you hire to be focused on getting their own listings sold? Are you beginning to realize why you never saw me while your home was listed for sale? I've had, 5 of my listings sell while you were on the market. And if you don't have your own personal statistics, use your company's statistics. My company has had 20 of our listings sell while you were on the market. Now, those are the kinds of results you want, aren't they? Let's meet on Wednesday. What time works better, 3 or 5? See how that is, it honors where they are. You appreciate what their objection is, and then you totally pivot and turn on a dime to make them understand why that's a horrible way to pick an agent, and how at least inviting you in for an appointment is potentially could get them what they're looking for to sell their house. So here's another example. All you agents are the same. Again, you're prospecting for a listing. All you agents are the same. And here's your conversational objection handling, following the pattern that we've just gone through. You know, I know it does seem that way. And in fact, we all do have the same license. Mr. or Mrs. Blank, do you realize that like any profession, we all get different results, don't we? I mean, what are you hiring when you hire an agent? And then whatever it is that they say, that fill in the blank is whatever they say. Exactly. It doesn't matter what they say because you want to make them right. So what are you hiring when you hire an agent? And whatever they say. Exactly. You're hiring someone to get you results. I mean, it's like all doctors are different. All lawyers are different. All CPAs have different levels of training. Well, so do real estate agents. Thanks for telling me what it is you're looking for, because I try to do the exact opposite of what other agents do. Did you know that the average agent sells one home every 90 days? Our company sells one home every 4 to 5 days. You see, Mr. and Mrs. Blank, I run my business like a profession, not a hobby. Every time the average agent sells one home, I'm selling 15 of them. Now, how would you like me to have 15 times as much exposure for your home? Let's get started. When would the best time for us be to get together? Do you guys see how that took their objection away from their thoughts? Instead of being defensive and answering their question, you use their objection and pivot to what it is you want to say. All right, I've got one more example. Hang on one second. All right. We're just going to give it a break. So again, this could be somebody that either for sale by owner or an expired listing, or somebody that had their house for sale and they took it off the market. We're just going to give it a break. So, name, you're thinking about giving it a break for a while. That's interesting. For how long do you think? You want to nail down more specifics. That's interesting. For how long do you think? Whatever they say. Blank, in the next, let's say they say for 3 months or through, until the beginning of the year. Seller, in the next 2 months, we're actually going to sell blank number of homes. And again, you guys, if you have your own statistics that are great, use them. If not, use your company's statistics. So you'll have to get these. You can get these from your broker, or from FMLS, from Georgia MLS, from Market Trends. There's lots of places where you can get your own brokerage statistics, or you can get area statistics like Market Trends on Georgia MLS, and the statistics from FMLS will have these areas by county, price range, so forth and so on. So you're going to want to know your statistics for the area that you're on the appointment for, trying to get a listing in. So let me back up. Blank, in the next 3 months, we're actually going to sell 112 homes, 45 homes, whatever the statistics show. Since I only need to sell your home one time, why don't we get together and I can show you how I do that? Is your calendar handy? So again, that was just a great, just a couple of examples on how to use the pattern for dealing with objections rather than memorizing a specific script. All right, I'm going to cover one more NLP technique. And this is like a pivot point. It's called level shifting, but it's that pivot. This is the phrase where you pivot them in their mind from what they are thinking and the track they are going down to what you want to think. So for example, they're thinking all real estate agents are the same. I'm wasting my time. And your pivot is to know I'm different. I can actually get the job done. I'm professional. My company is professional, so forth and so on. So these are just phrases. If you think of a teeter-totter or a seesaw, this is the pivot point. This is the fulcrum in the center that tilts the seesaw from one side to the other side. It shifts the level. It's called level shifting because you're switching from one side being down, you're just switching sides, or a scale, I guess. The real issue is, the real question is, I believe you're asking, so I gather, if I'm reading you correctly, so are you saying, what I sense is, so what you mean is, what appears most important to you is, so here are just a couple of examples using level shifting. Let's say you want to, the market analysis, the CMA, the recent sales show that their house is going to sell for less than what they want to sell it for. They're looking at the market from a year ago, a year and a half ago, where sellers were getting $20, $30, $50, $80,000 over list price. And we're not in that market right now, but that's still their perception. And your market analysis shows a lower list price than what they want to sell it for. And they say, well, we're not going to give it away. And you say, I understand you're not going to give it away. And it sounds to me like you want to sell your home and net the most money possible, right? And of course, they're going to say, right. So what that does is that shifts the conversation from a list price to what they're going to net. And then you go into a conversation and show them what they're going to net versus what it's listed for. Let's say their objection is, I'm tired of talking to agents. Well, of course. And what I sense is, that's the level shift, that you're tired of having your time wasted and not having any results, correct? That's exactly why I'm calling, to get you the results this time. And again, it just takes the conversation down a different road. A couple more examples. I want to think it over. Great. And so I gather you have some questions that you really do want answers to, right? Okay, well, since I help people buy and sell homes every day, let me help you with the most difficult questions. Let's start with the most challenging one first, and then ask them what their most challenging question is. What is it that you're thinking over? Okay, this is the proverbial, I have a friend in the business, or the ubiquitous, I have a friend in the business. Here's your answer. Almost everyone does. And what I'm hearing you say is that working with someone that you know and trust is important to you. That's great. And my clients feel the same way about me too. So tell me, how's your next home going to be different from the one you're in? All right. Before we go on to the conclusion, we have about 15 minutes. And I just want to show you. Okay, well, let me go to the conclusion. I've got a couple of videos I want to show you guys of some other really, really amazing communication skills for sales and business. So I will talk about the conclusion, but hang on, we're not done yet, so don't go anywhere. In conclusion, you never get a second chance to make a first impression. People do size others up and categorize them immediately. Again, judging a book by its cover, right, wrong, or indifferent, it happens. You need to gain their trust and confidence through rapport and conversational objection handling, controlling their thoughts through your questions, and motivational selling. There is vast room for misinterpretation through email and text communication, as we have talked about. Here are some really, really interesting YouTube channels with lots more broad-minded. Charisma on Command is fabulous. It is really, really fascinating on just interpersonal communication skills for all kinds of things, sales, business, interpersonal relationships, so forth and so on. This is a really, really interesting, fun channel called Charisma on Command. Dan Locke does a lot of sales and business videos and real estate. Grant Cardone, y'all may have seen him. He has done some interesting ads that you may have seen on Facebook or on YouTube. And so some of the things he does, however, have a really interesting YouTube channel with lots of good hints and tricks and tips on sales and communication. I want to show you, this is another one, 10 persuasive words millionaires use to get things done. And clients say, I'm not interested. 6 phrases that instantly persuade people. That's from Charisma on Command. 5 psychology tricks that make people obsessed with you. Charisma on Command. How to master sales on the phone. Grant Cardone. And then there are a bunch of interpersonal communication skills tests. The quadruplet babies I just showed you. 75 expressions in less than a minute. 4 magic phrases you can use to respond to anything. Here's a video resource on how to mirror, how to use mirroring to build rapport. Here's Tony Robbins on building rapport, a fun guide to communication, some non-verbal communication. And then again, at the end of this, this is the GREC marketing and advertising guide and some resources. And also I do have in the handouts some 3 sets of scripts and dialogues, objection handlers, scripts for expired listings, and an agent script book from Tom Ferry. But hang on one second. Let me show you. We've got about 15 minutes. So let me show you. There are resources for you in the handouts, as well as, all right, let me show you one more thing and then we will finish up. So additionally, here is what the handouts have. This is, the handouts are the outline of everything. This is basically the slides in outline form. I have the GREC marketing and advertising guide. These are license laws regarding marketing and advertising as of June 2022. That is all available in the handouts. Again, I thank you guys so much. We made it for your time and attention. Please confirm all advertising policies with your broker. We do have additional courses available for you, and you get to those by register for reclasses.com. You can either click on a specific geographic area or click Marietta for a master calendar. These courses are offered through the Georgia Real Estate Academy. Credits will be recorded within 3 to 7 business days. I have a YouTube channel called Real Estate Made Crystal Clear. My intended audience are all real estate agents in the state of Georgia. I cover issues like this, contract questions, ethics questions, license law. I've got 4 or 5 years worth of videos. I invite you to please check it out and subscribe to that channel for lots of information there. I thank you guys so much for your time and attention. I hope the 3 hours went by quickly for you. And I ask you or encourage you to be a blessing with your real estate license by communicating your desire to help others with their real estate needs. If you have not already done so before you leave, please type in your name, your email address, and your license number in the chat. It is going really quickly, so I'm going to stop the share. And if anybody has questions, feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question because the chat is going by too quickly for me to read it. But if you're not asking a question, please keep yourself muted so everybody can hear the question and the answer. And I thank you guys so much for your time and attention and hope you enjoyed the class. Any questions? Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad y'all enjoyed it.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Are you going to email us the handouts?
All right. Thank you again, everybody. I appreciate your time and attention and look forward to seeing you again really soon. Bye. If you like that video, check out the one here. If you like the content on this entire channel, please click here to subscribe. I try to take even the most complicated of real estate situations and make them crystal clear. See what I did there? Real estate made crystal clear. Thank you guys so much for watching.